Welcome back, my friends, to the Dime Store Cinema, where we talk movies and culture. So, I decided not to watch the Oscars this year because nothing interesting has happened in the past decade and a half. And of course, it's the one year when something of note actually happens. The slap heard round the world, as they're dubbing it, which I think is maybe a little self-aggrandizing, but we're talking about Hollywood, so that makes sense. Oh man, I will say that at the very least, I am welcoming the distraction from the craziness that's going on in the world today, whether it's the increase in gas prices and the price of buying anything in our country, to the failing of political leaders, to the looming World War III. It's nice to be able to rag on a self-important celebrity for a day or two. So yeah, I mean, that's kind of pointing towards my opinion towards the matter. I find the assault of people for telling jokes is a little heavy-handed, in pun intended. And I know that there's some arguments of whether or not it was staged or not. Regardless if it was staged or not, something happened that wasn't supposed to. Even if they did plan to do something, Chris Rock's response was genuine. So maybe they had planned something and then Will Smith hit him harder than he was anticipating, or the verbal outburst wasn't planned. Something happened that shook him up. So regardless of your stance, if it was staged or not staged, something genuinely happened to Chris Rock. So regardless, that's it. And there's no call for it. There's no reason for a joke to cause something like that to happen to a comedian. Comedians should be able to joke about whatever they want to. If you find it offensive, then don't support that comedian anymore. That's my stance on that. You know, get on with your life. Don't focus on what people say about you, regardless of who they are. It doesn't matter. Words, they're extremely important, but they only have weight in action. So don't let them weigh you down. Allow them to illumine thoughts. Don't let them weigh you down in action. That's all I'm going to say on that. I don't really want to talk about that. I don't care whatsoever about celebrities' lives, personal lives. It's none of my business. They can do what they want. I just found it ironic isn't the right word. More coincidental and indicative of my luck that I happened to miss the one Oscars ceremony where something of note happens. So today I'm joined by my friend Elijah Craig. It's my daily drinker. It's my go-to. It's my favorite budget bourbon. Most of the times, if you see me drinking, having a beverage, as it were, it'll be Elijah Craig, unless I am wanting to grab something else. Every now and then, Buffalo Trace, Wild Turkey 101, Monkey Shoulder, standard stuff. I'm too poor to get any good stuff, so you don't rely on me for any in-depth or particularly exciting bourbon or whiskey in general reviews or companion pieces. Today I want to talk about an underappreciated movie that came out in 2017, and that is You Were Never Really There. Or, I'm sorry about that. You Were Never Really Here. This is a movie directed by Lynn Ramsey, and Lynn Ramsey has not really, she doesn't have an extensive filmography, but she does have a handful of movies. And the ones that I've seen have been fairly decent. Probably nothing that I would say are amazing, but movies that are definitely competently made. And they all seem to have an underlying theme, or at least the one that I've seen, of trauma, particularly childhood trauma, grief of some kind. That all seems to be something that motivates her a lot. And that's definitely an element here in You Were Never Really Here. And I think that a caveat is necessary here when talking about the movie not being appreciated, or being underseen, or deserving more attention, underrated. I think one of the reasons why it was not talked about as much when it first came out, I heard some people talk about it, but for the most part, it kind of went under the radar. It's because it was, for one, it's a prime original, so there's that aspect of it. Also, I can understand why an audience who would typically watch a psychological thriller revenge film would maybe not quite follow, or not quite be expecting this movie. Most psychological thriller revenge movies are very much tied to the perspective of the protagonist, or if not a protagonist, the main character. And it typically is very much focused on the systematic actions leading to one of two scenarios. Either the downfall of the character by seeking out revenge. You see that a lot in particularly Asian cinema, Korean cinema in particular. One of my favorite directors, Park Chan-wook, director of Sympathy for Mr. Vengeance, Lady Vengeance, and Old Boy. Three of my favorite movies, really. All of which dealing with the destructive inevitability of seeking revenge. Or the other, and this is much more Western, if you want to divide the two, the catharsis and bringing the comeuppance of an evil actor. So typically when you're dealing with this genre, you have one of those two outcomes, with the focus in the perspective of the main character, and the narrative structure based on the actions leading towards one of those outcomes. So that's what you expect when you start watching one of that genre, and rightly so, because that's mainly what we have been exposed to. In most cases, it's hard to think of a different structure than that, just because of the material you're working with. What made this movie interesting, though, and I think also what led to it being a little more obscure, is that the focus was almost through the perspective of a personified grief or trauma. So the movie was, the narrative was told through an unreliable narrator, because it was told through the psychological working out of trauma and grief. So it's simultaneously through the perspective of the main character and also detached, because the character is so traumatized by past events. He is almost disassociated from himself in a lot of ways, and the movie is very much like that. So you have very raw, real, visceral, violent moments in the movie that feel very real, and then you have other moments that are completely detached, feel dreamlike, feel very whimsical, feel very emotional. It's reality told through the lens of emotion in these scenes, and it's very esoteric when it gets to that type of when it gets to those scenes. And I think that kind of maybe detached some of the audiences from the narrative structure, made it more difficult to follow when you're expecting one thing and you're getting something else. So you have this movie that's almost dual layers, like a human psyche, like someone trying to work through something, which very much is indicative of this character. And I think this movie demonstrates better than most movies the importance of varying perspectives in cinema. Now, if you want to make the argument of that meaning there should be more minority and female directors, you can. That's fine. My point is more that it's the perspective itself is different, regardless of who's telling it. It's different than what you normally see, and that made it very interesting. That made it stand out, in my opinion, from the rest of the movies like this. Now, I won't say that it's the best. I would prefer almost any of Park Chan-wook's movies to this movie. However, in terms of a movie just on its own and not being compared to other movies, it's extremely competent. It's very well made. It's very interesting, and despite its very heavy and difficult subject matter, it's a very fascinating film to watch. And Joaquin Phoenix's performance is spectacular. It's very interesting. The way that he was directed to act in this is fascinating to me. Whereas as most actors are acting toward and reacting to things in their physical space, it almost seemed as if he was directed to act to and against an emotional reaction to his physical space, as opposed to a sensual in terms of using your senses. So it's very interesting the way that he was. It seems he was instructed to act, and once again, it kind of leaned into the esoteric nature of this movie, which might have turned some people off. But if you're expecting it, it actually makes it more fascinating. And I would say that this is almost a proto-Joker role for Joaquin Phoenix. I don't know if it directly influenced the way that he decided to have that, way that he decided to present that character, but there are a lot of similarities. And there's enough dissimilarity to, you can't really say that it's the same thing. Joaquin Phoenix is a good enough actor to have the subtle nuances necessary to distinguish, but there are definitely a lot of similarities in the character. And I would say that one of the bigger differences is how the character decides to focus his energy, essentially. So to get into somewhat spoilers of the film, the Joaquin Phoenix plays essentially a fixer, if you will, a hired gun, someone who is hired by third parties to find people and punish the people responsible for their disappearance, if you will. What's interesting is how Lynn Ramsey decided to humanize Joaquin Phoenix's character. In most of these movies, your hero, if you want to call him that, or even anti-hero, will have a save the cat moment where he'll do something that shows, oh, he's a good guy at heart. He just, hard times, and he has to do with what he has to, do what he has to do. And in this movie, the humanizing actions performed by Joaquin Phoenix's character is essentially finding and brutally killing child abductors. And there is something that is humanizing about that, because I think that a great many people, myself included, would have a very hard time condemning anyone for tracking down and bringing harm to people who harm children. Now, I'm firmly against people getting a fair trial. I'm firmly for people getting a fair trial, making sure that they are actually guilty before something happening. But in the cases where someone is caught in the act, where there's no denying it, I wouldn't turn a person over to the authorities if I saw them defending a child. I wouldn't do it. I don't know many people who would. And maybe that's just the people that I choose to associate with. But, there are very few things that I have that firm of a line on, but that is definitely one of them when it comes to hurting children. In any case, that I think is a unique and interesting way of humanizing this character who is obviously broken in so many ways. The other thing that Lynn Ramsey decides to do to humanize him is he also helps take care of his ailing mother, who is suffering mental decline, seems to be some form of Alzheimer's. So those two elements are what humanize him. There's not this moment where he decides to, save a cat, as is the trope. There's something much more in line with what a character like this would be, and keeping in line with Lynn Ramsey's through line of trauma, and particularly childhood trauma. There's a lot of subtext within the movie that Joaquin Phoenix's character was horribly abused as a child, and then also suffered a great deal of PTSD as while he served in the military. So deeply, and you almost don't even want to assign the word flawed character. He's a broken character. He is a person who cannot function in society as he currently is. And the perspective of the movie is very much like that. And it's how you can pick up from the subtext. This is why he got into this line of work, why he does what he does, because he can't function in normal society. He is too broken of a human being. He's too broken to do this. And it's even evident, even at the end of the movie, after he has saved one of the victims, a little girl, a very young girl, from would-be molesters. He's still fantasizing, and possibly even more so now, fantasizing about killing himself, about ending it, not knowing how to function in society, not knowing what to do with this girl, because he's a broken person. And now he's even removed one step from humanity because he doesn't have his mother to take care of anymore, because in the twisting of this movie, as he tries to fulfill this mission, his mother gets killed by these other hired guns. So he's one more layer removed from humanity, not having that grounding, that purpose of taking care of her, and then coming back from it and trying to instead look at this little girl as being his grounding, while at the same time knowing that he can't provide for her because he himself is broken. And it's a very interesting perspective to have, knowing that one of the things that grounds you to humanity and humanizes you is your desire and willingness to save children, essentially. It's not essentially, but save children from would-be molesters and abductors, while simultaneously punishing those people. But also having the realization that, once you fulfill that role, you're too broken to provide for them in any other way. You're, the only thing that you really have to offer, the only thing that you have left in yourself is to be that strong, violent hand. And then having this this child who's had their innocence and childhood robbed from them, now be your responsibility because everyone else in their life has been killed by the person who abducted them, and then you killing everyone else that they knew because they were the ones who abducted them, putting them in this situation. It's a very powerful ending. Once again, done in a way that's very esoteric, though. So, once again, I understand why it maybe wasn't the most popular film, but I do believe that eventually it will be more recognized. I think as time goes, more people see it, more people will start talking about it. Maybe not, but more people will see it. More people will have it in their mind as being an above average, quite good film. So I think eventually it will have the recognition that it deserves, even if it didn't get it when it initially came out. And it's a shame. I definitely think that when good movies are made, they should be recognized. So if you haven't seen it, I definitely recommend seeing it. I did spoil a little bit, but it's still worth watching. I didn't really go into in-depth detail. It was more, my focus is more on perhaps why it wasn't as popular as I think it should have been when it came out. It's currently available on Prime. If you have Prime, it's currently available right now. Once again, it's a very good movie. I definitely recommend you watching it. So until next time, my friends, this has been Justin C. Bartlett with the Dime Store Cinema, reminding you all to fill your lives with amazing stories.